This is a clinic on how to build an entire layout. I've constructed this N-scale layout for purposes of a raffle prize for my club, the Boulder Model Railroad Club. And I've taken a series of pictures, and I'm going to show you how I made this and step by step what I did. All right, the first thing I did was go to the hardware store, and I had them cut a sheet of 3/8" plywood into sections, one of them equaling 42 inches by 54 inches, which would be the size of the layout. I also bought some 1x2 to make the braces underneath, and more braces will be put under that after we start cutting it. So the first thing you do is cut the braces to fit your piece, and screw them in from the top, as you can see down here on the bottom. Next, I drew in my railway using a marker, and this is all freehand. So I drew it in with my, this is going to be the depot area right here, and this siding will join in right here with a left-hand turnout and run around this way, and then right here it will be going up a grade, and it'll get to the top of the grade here, where it'll come around and come back down the grade and continue the circle until such time as you want to back into the station. So once that is drawn, in the red marker you see where I've outlined around my rail lines, and when we cut this out, this section right here will be picked up, and then we will have an incline going up into this area right here. Now, before we can cut, when we cut this out, to avoid the chance of breaking this thin neck right here, as you can see the grain is running this way, and it's going to be thin through here. When I cut it, I'm not going to cut one part of it right here. I'm going to leave one part of it intact until we get the braces in. So I drilled a wide hole here and a wide hole here, wide enough to get my jigsaw blade into it, and then cut around like that. Now, before I cut it the other way, I flipped it over and put some masking tape on it to kind of hold it even so that I could cut the other side down. Now, once I have both sides cut, you can see it still hold together here, but while it's upside down, I don't have to worry about anything breaking because it's all lying flat. I have my square out here to check to make sure that everything here is perpendicular. It will help you considerably if everything is perpendicular, because now we're going to, now that it's turned over like this, we can see where we're going to put the braces, and I'm going to have 5 braces in this. So I measured this. Well, I didn't actually measure it. What I'm doing here is measuring how far. In other words, I want one here and I want one here, and I'm getting those inches so that I can mark it here and here, and so that I can have my braces running where I need them. Now, if your base board was cut perfectly square, you can cut all of these pieces the same length, but I wouldn't count on it, and as it turned out, mine wasn't perfectly square, so I had to measure each one of these to put it in. But I had it marked. I don't know if you can see the little marks that I made here, but I had the marks made here and the same length down here, so that these are perpendicular to the cross pieces. And also this will tell me on the other side where this mark is. It'll tell me on the other side where I can screw in from the top. But I put some 1.5 inch screws in through here on either side to hold all of these braces in. And as you can see, a brace runs through here. It runs across here where this will hold up, and also this will screw down to it. As it turns out, before I finished, I put another cross piece right here and put another brace across so that I could screw this piece into it. You're going to need one there. But I didn't need any more braces anywhere else. Okay, now using the same measurements that I had before, I measure where my cross brace is underneath. And of course the cross braces are holding this up now. We don't have to worry about it breaking anymore. But once I get that in, I can screw everything in across the top. Don't make the mistake that I did right here. If you see this little black spot there, you don't want, well, that's the last place you can have one. You don't want one any place over in here because this place is going to be raised up. So you only screw on the outside of this red line, the outside of the red line. Now to build our first braces. The first thing I had to do is decide how high I wanted it. Between the top of the lower base and the bottom of the upper base, I wanted 2 inches. So to that I had to add this width right here of the 1x2, which is actually 1 1/2 inches exactly, and then I had to add another 3/8 for the thickness of my sub base, and then I added 2 inches to that. So I ended up with 3 7/8 inches, and that's how long I cut these 2 pieces right here. You will need a total of 4 of these, so you can cut them all at once. But you'll notice that I have marked this. I think I have a better picture. Yes, I've marked a spot in here, 3/4 of an inch up, 3/4 of an inch in, which is of course half of this 1.5 inch width. I've also marked a spot here, 3/4 of an inch up from the floor. So if I put a screw in through here and in through there, with it turned up this way, when I turn it back around, this bottom should match this bottom. So as you can see, I've got them screwed in now, but this is facing down, and eventually I'm going to want it to go up. So before I cut this piece down here, I'll lay these over and flip the entire thing over. Now I'll cut out the piece that I left so that I can raise the upper level up. I'll flip these pieces around, and then I can mark my spot and put in my screws to hold this piece up. Alright, as you can see, we have no floor here to put the railroad track on for this line coming around and through because it's all raised up. So we need to get a piece of board through there. Now as you can see, there's a brace under here to rest the board on, and there's one on the other side. You can see it a little bit better here. And from the outside of this board to the outside of the other one, I measured at 12.5 inches. So I cut a piece of board from what was left over from the main piece, and I cut it at 12.5 inches, made it the entire length, or rather width of the layout, and clamped it down. Next I tipped it up and scribed along here with a pencil. So then it was simple to cut the piece, and now I have one that will fit exactly. So first I will use some contact cement where it's going to meet those cross braces underneath, and then I will screw it in at the edges, and there we have a piece that fits, but as you can see, there's a slight rise here. You might be able to see that. I can't tell if it's a riser, but I do know that I did flip it over and put some clamps underneath just to make sure that I had a nice, tight, even fit. All right, but now we have the braces in up here to our level area, but our incline here, it's kind of a very shallow incline here, and then it gets steep all of a sudden. Well, we need to keep the incline exactly the same all the way for a smoother operation of our locomotives. So, to do this, first of all, I took some measurements. Now, this is the edge of the pieces. This is level up here, and then it starts coming down. So I measured this at 68 inches, and that's from right here where the cut starts to right here on the underside. Remember, we're measuring the run, not the distance, because this length on top will be a little bit longer. So to get the correct amount, I'm going to put a brace at 48 inches. Remember, I already have one here, but I'm going to put one at 48 inches and one at 34 inches. And as it turns out, I also put one down here later. So how do we figure how long a piece to put here and put here? Well, you need to know your math. So we have our run, we have our rise, and this is the distance. Now our rise, remember, was 2 inches between the top of the bottom piece of plywood to the bottom of the top piece of plywood. So we have to add the amount of the top piece of plywood, which is 5/16 of an inch. So we have 2.3125 as our rise. We have our run at 68 inches. So we divide the rise by the run and get 0.034, or a 3.4% grade. Now, to find our 48 inches, how long it should be, well, we take that and we multiply it by our grade. So 48 inches times 0.034 is equal to 1.632. 0.632 is almost the same as 5/8. We're like 7/1000ths of an inch off, and I really don't think we're going to be doing anything that close. So 1 5/8 inches is going to be our rise. But remember, we have to add, we have 1 5/8 inches, and we have the 1.5 inch of the brace we're going to screw it to. And in here you can see we do count the 5/16 on the top, but we don't count the 5/16 underneath, so they cancel each other out. So the length of the piece of board that I'm going to have to use for my brace is going to be 3 1/8 inches. We do the same calculation at 34 inches and end up with 2 5/8 inches is what it will be at that point. So here is my 3 1/8 inch piece screwed in, and here is my 2 5/8 inch piece screwed in. So now we have it pretty stable, because remember, we have braces over here along this one, and we have a brace here and a brace here. So for this one, I just put a piece in, use my pencil to mark it, and cut off that piece to go in. While I have this up, when I was working on it, I realized that I needed another piece here. So I used my, because I was sagging a little bit at this point, so I used my formula again to figure out how long a piece went here. Also, this piece right here, which is flat and is at the level of the front up here, this became a little weak. So I also put in a cross member across here and screwed this into it. That's just to stabilize this piece right here. So now I have in my braces. You can see my board under here, and now my rise is going to be smooth and easy all the way up. When you run your hand across here and start going up, you don't feel any change at all. Your hand doesn't, and neither will your locomotives. And over here, when you get over the top, you don't feel any change when you run your hand across here. Even though it is an incline, there's no swoop here, and there's no dip down here when you get to the top, as you get very often when you use prefabricated inclines. All right, the next, I've decided that I'm going to be putting a mountain in across here, and since the mountain is going to come across here where I had my turnout, I needed to move my turnout out of the way and keep it out. I still have plenty of room down here for my siding, but I did need to move that back. So now I'm ready to lay my cork, using my turnout to judge how I cut this strip of cork so it could fit in against this. And as you'll also notice, I'm only using half of the cork road bed. I'm not using the entire amount. That's because if anyone has seen my ballasting clinics, I believe it's titled Ballasting Flex Track. The fall on the side I like to create with just ballast. I don't like the wide cork using to make the fall. I think it creates problems that aren't necessary. You can be the judge of whether or not the way I do ballast looks good, but I really think it's much easier, much faster, although it does use a little more ballast. Ballast isn't that expensive. All right, this is something I probably should have done earlier before I laid the cork, but I realized that I wasn't going to be able to stabilize this track well enough without getting into it from the top. So I cut out this circle. This will also allow me to, I'm going to need to ballast all the way through here, because when you look through this front, through here, you can see all the way back to here. So it needs to be ballast. It's also, the tunnel will need to be masked on either side. And of course this access hole will allow me to do that. Also, to have a way to reinsert it, I put these posts in, cut these posts the same as the even part, and these a little shorter because remember we're going downhill here. But I just cut them to fit under what was already there, screwed them in from the top, and also flipped it over and screwed them in from the bottom to stabilize them. Then I can replace this and screw it down later when I'm finished all the work that I have to do. Because, and this can be put in, I can put the ground cover over it, and it's like it was never there. Okay, so now I've laid my track, and you can see here I've put in 2 railers. Railers also serve as good railroad crossings. They're actually look like wooden railroad crossings, so I'm going to have a road that's going to come across here and come across here, and then it's going to go in here. Try to get these straight. I didn't get them too straight, and it makes my road a little crooked, but I'm not real worried about it. But the track, when I laid it down, I laid in these pieces, and then I laid this piece up to here. I think there were 2 pieces. The pieces are 30 inches long, so I laid it, and it stopped right there about. And then I laid the rest of it along through here, soldering as I went, all the way up and around, and I finished up right about here. When you want to put your last 2 pieces together, you want to do it on a straightaway. You do not want to do it on a curve. It must be on a straightaway. If you try to do it on a curve, you're going to create all kinds of problems for yourself. So plan ahead and make sure there are plenty of straightaways on here. Here, 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 here. There are plenty of straightaways. Make sure you end up there. Anyway, I ended at this space. Now I'm going to turn my layout around and show you. This is where I had the last piece at the top on the right. Now it's coming from the left. So I've put my joiners on and pushed them all the way back. See, I've removed the ties here so that I can push these joiners all the way back. Just this little lip is over here where I'm going to set down the other rail. Okay, push them all the way back. Then I attached my other piece of rail, and it's of course going to be too long. It has to be long enough to reach. And I'm going to lay it down across the other end. And as you can see, I can see my end right here, so I'll cut that off there. I can see my end right here, so I'll cut this right here. And then they lay down, you push the joiner across and solder. It's the simplest thing in the world. Then you take the ties that you cut out, you put them back in and glue them down, and they'll be ready for ballasting. Next we're going to power the track. This is a small layout. It only needs power. It needs to be powered in one place. So I have the positive lead soldered over here and the negative lead soldered over here. Now you'll also see another positive lead over here. Now the reason that is there is because this piece of rail relies on this point up here to pick up power from this rail. Well, you should never rely on a point to pick up power. It may not get there all the way, it may be dirty, and it may not pick up the power. So because this one is positive, this one is positive, and now I always have power in this rail when the power's on, and it goes all the way through the point. As far as this rail, it doesn't need one, because this, you can put one in if you want, but this particular rail goes all the way around and comes back along the turnout and continues right through here. All right? Continues right through there. And of course the point on this side, this is also powered by this, by the power going that way. So you don't really need power here, but you can put it in if you want to. Once you've soldered those in, and I said this piece, this is my main line right here, and this is the siding, and I've joined it in with this and drilled a hole through my braces and taken it up through the top where I will connect it to my controller. Now I'm going to mask my front tunnel, and as you can see, the pieces that I put in here to that I'm going to use later to hold up the top piece when I put it back also serve to hold the pieces of tunnel sides, because when you look through this tunnel right here, you're going to be able to see back in here. So I'm going to need to ballast the rail in here, the track in here, and I'm going to need people to see the sides of the tunnel walls. I'll show you how I made these walls a little later when I get to some other tunnels. Going to continue to mask. Now here, this is foam core. I've ripped the paper off, and once you take the paper off, the foam core is very flexible. And I've cut strips and I've put them around, and then once they're glued up and in place, I'll use a knife to cut them so that they match the edge of the plywood. Over here, I've put some pieces of 1-inch foam out because I'm going to have, using this foam core, I'm going to put a tunnel mask right through here, and I wanted it a little closer to the track so that when you look into the tunnel portal, which is going to be right here, you will be able to see it. If it were back here, you just have a big open empty space, and I expect when you look into the tunnel you should be able to see the sides of the tunnel. Okay, and here is how I make those tunnel masks. I cut a strip of foam core to size. You get this foam core. This is the cheaper foam core I got at the dollar store for $1 each, 30 by 20 inch sheets. You can also get a better quality at Hobby Lobby for, I believe the white foam core is $4. Don't forget your coupon. But using a straight edge, you draw your horizontal lines in it, and then etch your vertical lines alternating. As you can see, one here and then skip and then one here, and this makes your laid brick, this case granite stone. And using any kind of pick, any tool that you want, I find the one with the hook in it is a little easier, because this gets to be tedious making all of these little marks. Then I used gray weathering powder. I grind it in for the base granite color. Then I'll also use some red rust and dirty yellow and grimy black for highlights. And I will pin it up against those against that foam that I put out there. And now I've got the mask on this side of the tunnel. And also, before you can make your mountain, you need to, and you can complete your tunnels, you need to ballast into the tunnel a certain length of the ways. Here on this one, you can see back in here and back in here, it almost went all the way. I probably could have ballasted all the way, but why waste the material? You can also see that I've painted the tunnel, inside tunnel area, black. If you have it black, you could paint this black too instead of having the stones on it. It's up to you how much detail you want to put in. But I like to mask my tunnel walls. The ballasting is done with 2-to-1 glue. The spoon spreads it on down the middle and down the sides. The brush brushes all of the ballast away. And since this is going to be in the tunnel, when this dries, come back and make sure that you have all of the ballast cleaned out between the rails, because you won't have good access to it later. Also make sure that all the glue is off of it. Here I've put a train on just to show myself to be sure I know where to make the inside wall on this one up here. I also put it down here to check to make sure everything was right. But now I have to have a place for the, I have to build the rest of the masking. I guess before that I cut this away. I cut this tunnel portal out, and you can see this main front tunnel is the first one that I masked. I've also ballasted it using the hole up above to get in there to get it all done. So I came in from the middle, and I also came in from the back and from the front, so that it's completely ballasted. And now that it's all masked, I will be able to cover it, and I won't need to remove the cover anymore. As you can see, you put it back on and screw it down. Make sure your screws are nice and flat, so that you can put your ground cover over it and completely cover it. In an emergency, you could always tear it out again, but we're going to build in access to reach the tunnel from the outside edges. Okay. Part of the inside of the tunnel is of course going to be formed by the edging that we put around here. I put this edging, I've cut it to match the incline right here, and this part right here matches the incline where it's opposite. I've also put this piece in here. It's glued up against this and against this little post that's under there, and it's 1 inch away from here, so that I'll be able to abut a piece of 1 inch foam up against it. But before I do that, I've also masked this side the same way I did the front side. I've masked this side. Now, it's not because anything's going to be seen there, but this area through here is going to be stuffed with newsprint and then covered to make flat ground across here. And this masking is up just to keep all of that stuff from falling out underneath and keep it where I need it, which is in here. Okay, so I've put this piece up over here, and it's of course painted black. I've made other wall pieces. Now these particular pieces extend to the bottom, and they're glued to the bottom and to the top edge right here. So you only see the tunnel, the part that's masking the tunnel, but this piece actually goes down to the bottom, and it's glued at the bottom and of course along this edge right here, and just stands up. Now eventually we'll have a piece of foam going over the top, and then it will be stabilized by that piece. So I've got that piece up and that piece up right here. I've put up this piece across here. It's all painted black. Eventually we're going to change this. I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to be doing over here. You can see the power cords here that are ready for the controller. But again, I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do it, so I just cut it. I just put a piece up straight across, and I knew I could cut it later. But I painted it black because it's inside the tunnel. And here's a picture of this complete side piece over here, and here's the piece I showed you before that it's gonna butt against this and also against this, and against this, and of course we're going to glue it at the bottom. Now for my sidewalls, this is a lower tunnel, and you saw me put this masking piece up here. Well, now I need a piece to go along here and follow it. So I need a specially cut piece. So I've drawn onto here what I need. This is my side piece here, straight up and down. So I've drawn this piece out like this because this is where I want the mountain section to end. And I've drawn this back in. It's not showing right here, but it does show when you look at it. The pencil shows up on black. Okay, so I've cut that back into here, and then it goes across like that. And then I will take a piece of cut-right wax paper, and I put the corner of the paper up here where it's abutted against the end piece, and the corner goes across here, and then I just trace the line right on this piece. Trace the line here and trace the line here, and then I'll cut that out. Put it on a piece of 1-inch foam and trace it, and then I will cut out 2 of these pieces. Cut out this, cut it out twice. There we go. I will also need a 3rd piece that is the same size, except it needs a lip coming out, and that will form the top of the tunnel. So I will cut that piece out. When I stack those beside the lower tunnel, I will have the side of that tunnel. Now for the inside, this will be the base of the mountain, the very furthest piece out front, and it will also be the side walls of these two, of the tunnel over here and the tunnel over here. So again, I cut out a piece of wax paper, the size that I want. The dip in here is for the bill. I have a coal mine I'm going to put in there, and that's where the coal mine is going to be, right there. So I cut this piece, I cut out a piece of foam there using the wax paper to show me how to cut it. And there is that piece right there, the piece that I just traced with the wax paper. That piece is there. Then I traced that. Then I cut another piece that dipped back a little here, but was the same length outside. And 2 lengths is 2 inches, and 2 inches is as tall as I need this tunnel to be. So after that, the 3rd piece that goes across will go all the way across and form the top of the tunnel. Just as the 3rd piece here, remember I cut out 2 pieces and then one with a little lip on it, and that one formed the top of the tunnel. Okay? Then there's a piece here, and then this one forms the top of the tunnel. Okay? Just cut them back, staggering, and you're going to find that I've made some changes. You can change this as you go. You can cut pieces out, and you can add pieces. I ended up adding some pieces over here. But now we have the basis of our mountain. You can also see back through here that I've cut away the side piece to match my mountain. Now, access for the tunnels. Now that I have the end pieces in, and the tunnels covered, you have to be able to access. So using a ruler, I measured down here to the bottom of the tunnel piece. Yeah, I know exactly from over here, I can see the one that forms the top of the tunnel, and I cut beneath it all the way down to the plywood, and I put a little notch in here to grab it. I do the same thing over here, making it look as neat as possible using a ruler. I cut this piece out. So when you stick your finger in here, you'll be able to pull those pieces out. And then you can access your tunnel. You kind of reach back in here if something gets stuck in that long front tunnel that's covered all the way. That one's a little hard, and for cleaning it, you may need to put your cleaning rag or solvent or eraser or whatever you're using on the end of a 18-inch long stick or something and put it back in there to get at it. But you can clean it. You can also use a cleaning car. So now I'm going to work in the center section. Now you may have noticed that I had left a big lip over here and that's so that it would support this. This was the hardest piece that I cut. This piece here went from 1 inch here to nothing here, just back on this side. It looks like 1 inch all the way across, but here you can see how it's cut off. That was a little hard to cut, but that's to keep it level, so that this piece and this piece are level with all these pieces over here. Okay? And now that I have that, I'm going to use newspaper through here, tape it down, and I'm going to cover it with this is paper mache. I use a product called Celluclay, and this is the white Celluclay. It also comes in gray. You mix it with water. It already has the glue in it. I use this to form the short part, or the low part of the incline, and then this to make my hill. I'll cover the top of that. And I also ran it around here. Since this is going to be a lake, I had to build it up here a little bit. So now I have to wait for this to dry before I can go to the next step. As I finished making the lake, I realized that I now had the name for my lake, and that is going to be Sweetheart Lake. Is the name of my layout. You can see here I've used black foam core to make my road. Black foam core I purchased at Hobby Lobby. It's a little more expensive than the white. It's $6, but it's only $3.60 with your 40% off coupon, so don't forget it. I cut these pieces 30 scale feet across and run them up into here. This part just fits actually right up against the railer. Now over here I cut the piece to go up against the rails, and then I cut another strip out and put it in between the rails, although it can't be quite as thick, because it needs to be below the rails enough so that when a train passes over, that those little metal pieces representing air hose don't catch onto it. So you'll have to experiment with that until you get that low enough. On this side I built up with paper mache and built it all the way up to the edge of the rail, and this is going to be a dirt road over here coming up. You can see how I've cut into here so that I can get up here. I've got a couple of wood cabins to put up there. But this is just black foam core, and we'll make it look more like a road later. I've been experimenting with color here. I didn't like this color, so I had to redo that. And you'll see what it looks like later. But you can see I also bought these portals. These are HO portals. This one actually is a double wide portal. The angle here is so acute that even though it's N scale, I needed a double wide HO scale to clear it. There's hardly any room between the ballast and the edge, the opening of these trailers. I just cut them down to be the proper height for N scale. Over here, these are HO regular, but because they're sitting on a radius, I needed them extra wide, so I used the HO. If I had wanted to use N-scale portals here, the portal would had to have been absolutely perpendicular to the rails, which meant they couldn't be where I wanted them. So if you want them to go where you want them and put them on a radius, then you're better off cutting down an HO portal to fit. Using the same paper mache I used on the lake, I've covered up the areas where I had right here. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers of 1 inch foam. So I've covered that up here. You can see I've also covered up where the mountain layers joined in with the side pieces. So I've covered that also, so that there will be no gap there and no line. More over here, as you can see how close it is right here. Even though this is double wide HO on an N-scale track, there's hardly any room between there and there. So it was exactly the right size for what I needed. I just had to cut it down to the proper height. But again, using plaster of Paris, not plaster of Paris, rather paper mache to cover in areas where I might have gaps. Same thing over here. You see that there are 3 layers of foam here, so I've covered it over. Now this one, you can see the portal actually lies perpendicular, so you could use an N-scale portal here. I had decided rather than go back to the store, I would make my own. You can see that in all of this other work I'm doing, this is still wet through here. It's a little dry up in here. The paper mache takes a while to dry, but it does dry very hard. Back here I've stuffed all this open area with newspaper and then covered it with the paper mache. I also put in this block right over here, which is actually a block that went out to here. It's cut down to the edge, and I will do more with that later. This edge is going to change as I look at it later. So as we back off now, I can see that everything is taking shape. I've got this filled in down here with paper mache. Left a little crack out over here, but that'll be covered with ground cover. So it's starting to take shape. I was looking at this and decided I didn't like this big high wall. I was thinking of making this all granite stone, but I've decided I wanted this to be more like this and have a mountaintop coming out to it. Now I've ballasted, finished my, remember the ballasting is already complete in the tunnels, so I've done my ballasting everywhere else and cleaned it up and put my train on and ran it to make sure everything ran properly, and thankfully everything ran smoothly. I didn't have anything to clean up. I actually did a really good job of ballasting this. You can see now I have my controller put in over here. So as I mentioned before, this is where I decided that I wanted the mountain to come back, so I cut off the paper mache that was here and then carved this back, and I put this back a step. You'll notice also that my coloring now is a lot redder than what I had originally. The other was too brown. This is just, I've just cut into the foam, the 1-inch insulating foam with a knife, and then scored it crosswise like this, and also scored it up at an angle, and it tore out little pieces, and then I used chalk. I covered it with yellow chalk, the dirty yellow chalk, and I colored it with the rust red. New Rust is the color of AIM chalk that I use there. I also need to repair these. I think I've got a chunk in here that needs to be filled in with some plaster, and over here I've got a little plastering to do. Alright, this is, remember that front face that was just masking? Well, what I did was I took an edge of the 1-inch foam and I cut my krenels in it, and then I sliced it off. Don't try to cut these krenels into a thin strip. Cut them into a thick strip and then cut off the part that you need. It will bend, and I can bend it around here and glue it up, and then I can come back later and cross-hatch it and color it in. Okay, here's my last portal. And this is the one I want to make my own portal for, because it's a whole lot cheaper and it doesn't really take that long. First I took a piece of foam core, or removed the paper from it so there's nothing but foam core there, and I cut it to size. Then I marked in where I wanted my tunnel portal to be, and I cut that out, then put the whole piece down, and I made another one because I'm going to be double thickness. I also drew inside the original portal another piece because I want this piece to be viewed from this one. This one goes behind it, so the portal, the tunnel portal opening will be just a little bit smaller. You must consider this when you're deciding how big to make this. Next to the track, you need, this is the one that fits the track. This one is a little bit bigger to show this one. And that's how it looks when you put them up one inside the other, and the inside one has the distance that you need. Okay, then I cut some strips to put on the top and the front. This will be the part that's concrete, and also one down the side. You can see how it looks now, and this part will be the concrete that's poured on top of the stone that's going to be there. So then I etch in my arcs, my arches, and you bring them all the way around, and of course I'll etch the one in the back to match it. Then I'll draw in my horizontal lines using a straight edge, and once I have my horizontal lines finished, I'll do my vertical lines, again making sure that I bring the vertical lines all the way around at the portal. Bring them all the way around, all the way around. And once you have all of that done, you can put it up, color it the same way we did the walls, and here I'm adding yellow and red is on. I paint the concrete part, and there we have our tunnel. Alright, the center area, you can see I've cut much of the stone, or the rock face out here. And again, that's just carving crantles and then slicing across it and then coloring it with yellow and rust red chalk. I put in the tailings here, this hole that I cut in. You may have seen it in other pictures. I'm going to have a coal mine here, and this is the mine. The building's going to set here, and I've spilled out the tailings here that are going to be underneath it. And of course I'll have an old railroad track coming out where the coal is loaded. But I put down my ground cover so that I can put my building on it. This building was already constructed. I used that for a contest, part of a diorama that's been sitting in my house taking up space. So I decided to donate it. You can see I've also got ground cover up along the edges of the rock there. But now that I've got, once I get this glued in, then I can start doing other things to make the make it look dressed a little better. Okay, now I told you that I may want to make some changes to the rock, and I did. This big flat area over here, I filled in here. And then I filled another piece on top of this, so this whole area looks a little differently. You can see where I've made mistakes and just run it back. The gap I didn't get too well, so I filled it in with caulk so that I could put ground cover over the top of it. But whenever you're, you can change anything you want. Just remember that if you have a crack, you'll need to fill it in with something. Now these gaps here I don't worry about, because I'm going to fill them in with the scree that falls, and that will be covering that. I'll show you that when I get to the ground cover. Alright, we're going to lay ground cover here, just plain white glue, which we'll brush to cover the area. This is the earth blend. It's a little browner than other colors. This is green blend, but actually I believe I blended this myself with dark green and yellow grass and burnt grass, and some of the brown earth blend makes up this, so that I have all kinds of different colors in there. I use my brush to blend the two areas together, and then I'll spray it. Now this is 4-to-1 glue. 2-to-1 glue comes out, but it comes out in a straight stream that just blows your ground cover everywhere, even though there's glue underneath. So you need to cut it to 4-to-1. Because it's 4-to-1 glue, be sure that you totally saturate your ground cover. You can see how the white shows through here. The white part of what you see as white is glue. If you don't thoroughly saturate it, when it dries, some of the ground cover may not be sticking or sticking to itself, and it will blow away, it will knock away. If you tip the layout on its side to work on the underside, it'll fall out and get into everything. Also, I would like to point out that in N-scale I only use fine ground cover. Next, I have some small talus. It's a light yellowish beigeish color, and I put this around here for scree. Just dump it on with a spoon, right along the edge. And then I have some reddish and brown color that I put on top of that. The reason I put the other one first is I had more of the yellow than I did of the other, so this way I don't have to use as much red, and what I've got will last. I glue it the same way I do with ballast on the ties, using 2-to-1 glue, just dripping it down, getting it saturated so it will remain in place. So I've finished the ground cover in this area. As you can see, the brownish areas are worked into the greenish areas, and I've added this piece over here to kind of help. Instead of having a straight drop down here, now it kind of comes out like that and flows a little bit better. I thought it looked better, and so I did it. Now I've finished the ground cover everywhere. I left a few places because I was going to have some friends work on it. I'm going to show them how to do this rock face. I have a video on it, but I wanted to do hands-on with some personal friends. Down here, I have used a latex paint to paint the wood and the edges of my lake. And this will seal it. You paint it before you do the ground cover. Paint it first, then put the ground cover over and bring the ground cover over the paint. This way, when you pour the realistic water, you won't be losing any soaking through. I've repaired the damage to these old turnouts. I painted them and then put some soot on them. I've added this wall over here. Here is my ballasting. For those of you who think that you need all of that wide cork to get a nice fall, look at what I've done. Look at this nice trough down the middle. I think that this is a superior way to ballast, and no one is ever going to convince me otherwise. You'll also notice that even though this is N scale, I'm using medium ballast. Now, medium ballast is not very prototype. These pieces of gravel are bigger than a man's fist in 160-to-1, but I like it because of the texture. I don't like the texture of the fine ballast. It just looks like flat sand. So that's why I use medium ballast. Use a multicolor and it gives an even better texture. Here's a picture. I've got this painted now and weathered a little bit, and back here you can see the tunnel mask, and this looks far superior to just a big empty black hole. So it doesn't cost much, and it doesn't really take a long time to get those masks in there, and I advise that you use it. Another picture of my portal up here, and the scree running through here, using the scree to cover any cracks that you have between layers of foam. All right, now I've poured my realistic water. I always use realistic water by Woodland Scenics. I've tried other things. I've even tried using just plain polyurethane that you put on wooden floors. This is more expensive, but you will be happier with the results if you go ahead and pay the money. I've also built a retaining wall through here. I had to raise this area and this mound up here. Basically, I raised it up to level with the track ties, but I needed it to be just a little bit higher, so I took some of the same talus that I used for the scree, and I mixed it with a very thick glue. I used Crafter's Picks. You can also use Aleene's Tacky Glue. And I just mixed it all together and then troweled it in and smoothed it with a wet trowel or trowel-shaped palette knife. Over here, this I put in because this particular kind of road. There's going to be a road here, and if this weren't in there, then this road would gradually wash away into the lake. So I put these in there because they would be there in real life. I just used some large talus here, put it down, and covered it with straight white glue. The white glue seeped down in around all of it. It doesn't show too well here, but the white paint that I had there has been painted dark blue in the center and fading to lighter blues out at the edge. The light is shining on it right now, and you can't see it very well, but you'll see it in other pictures where it looks a little better. There's another picture of the retaining wall that I put in, and it's when I poured the white glue into it, some of it got out into the realistic water, but eventually when it dried clear, and you can't tell where it was. I also put in this, after I poured the realistic water, I realized that I wanted a dock, so I ran off and built this. Took about 30 minutes, and I stuck that in. You have several hours that you can still push things into the realistic water without a problem. Now I'm going to use AIM weathering powder. Looks like it's been bought by Monroe Models. I'm going to use dirty yellow to create my dirt road around the lake. I use this brush that I cut the bristles off of. There's only enough bristle left to hold some of the powder, and I just draw in, scraping away the ground cover as I go, leaving the grass in between. It's really quite an easy thing to do. And here it is complete, my road all the way down. If you remember, I built up this area even with the road, even with the track level. Here I used a longer bristle brush, and I just brushed it over the ground cover that was there. So what was brownish and greenish ground cover is now dirt. You can also get a better look at the lake here with the light coming from a different angle, and you can see how it's darker in the center and lighter out here. There's been 3 pours since this was done, and it's looking very nice. I've also got my cabins up here and the pathway leading to it, a place where they'll park their vehicles. All right, I have decided that my depot is going to be on asphalt. So instead of having a joint here between this asphalt and the asphalt over here and the asphalt here, I've torn this out, and I'm just going to have one piece and define the road with the white sidelines that are going to go all along the road. So I've cut out a piece of black foam core. This piece is 30 scale feet wide, the same as this piece, and we'll use road lines to define the road all the way through here, and then up through here and on into the area here. I've got some buildings now that I've added, a depot and a storage shed. I've got deciduous trees now. I've got some fir trees up in here, and I'll have a lot more trees later. Now for lining, I use Linotape 1/32 of an inch, yellow for the center stripe and white for the edging and for the parking lot. 1/32 of an inch is 5 inches in N scale, which may be a little wide, but no one's going to see it, and it looks just fine. So as you can see, I've lined off my road here just inside. So this, what was a 30 scale foot spread, is now 25 feet between these lines. And I kept the same thing right through here. I laid the yellow down the center and one right beside it for our double lines up here, no passing. For the I want a broken line here, but rather than try to piece together a bunch of little pieces in a straight line, it's much easier, although a little wasteful, to just go ahead and lay out the entire piece in a straight line. Then I made a cut at 6 scale feet and then at 9 scale feet. 6 scale feet and then a 9 scale foot space. I don't know if that's prototype, but it looks right to me, and that's what I've decided to do. So here's the 25 scale feet in between, and as you can see, that's plenty of room for a vehicle to travel. Now we have everything lined off. We've got to take care of the parking lot. Actually, before I do the parking lot, I want to weather the asphalt. It's too uniform in color, so I'm using AIM or Monroe weathering powder. This is dirty white, and I use a brush that has some bristles on it. And I will brush this into the foam core, and it sticks there very well. As a matter of fact, you can get it wet. After it's set there a while, you can get it wet, and when it dries, the white will return. Okay, so that you see now, you have a more realistic looking road color. And you can work that any way you want. The foam core, if you dent it, the dent stays. You can tear out potholes, you can put in cracks, you can do whatever you want to it. Okay, now down here, I've put in the lines for the parking lot, but I also have some car stops along through here. They're supposed to represent concrete car stops. Here's an angle that shows it to you just a little better. This is a piece of 1/16 by 1/16 plastic, and I have tapered the top edge on both sides so it's almost round, and placed them on as car stops, and taken out the line, taken out the white lines in between to show this is where you turn in. This is the base to an interlocking tower that I'm going to place there. So there's my tower in place, and you can see I also made a set of steps for my getting up onto the depot dock from the these are just pieces of white styrene plastic laid down to form a step. Also added some trees, deciduous trees down below. Now up above I ordered, in the upper levels I have nothing but conifers, and you can see I have a little forest here. Down here is a fawn and a doe. I've put in my old railway. I just put in the ties and then put the ballast on top of the ties, no roadbed under it. Of course the steel rails were taken away. This mine's been abandoned for over 100 years. And I've started putting weeds in, just larger pieces of ground cover scattered around, and then covered with 2-to-1 glue. And there we have the finished product. You can see down here that I did find that loading dock. You can see over here that this pathway looks a lot better now that I cut into the side. So I've got trees where I need them. I've also put foliage growing up the walls here, growing up the walls here. You use trees and foliage like this to hide things that you don't want to be seen, things that didn't come together too well. Instead of spending a lot of time making them look more natural, just cover them up with something nobody can see them. Got a trees here to cover up this edge. I've got foliage here to cover up that one, and this one, and foliage is wrapped around here to cover up that. But this is quite a nice layout. I've shortened my wire here so that my little Bachmann controller can sit here. And it's 42.5 inches by 54 inches, or 3.5 feet by 4.5 feet. And this particular setup can be done in other ways than I have done it. Use your imagination. That's all it takes to build an N-scale model railroad layout. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out my videos on ballasting. And also I have one on how to do this particular rock face so that you can see it in motion.